Thank you very much, Jesse, for the warm word of introduction. Thank you to the organizers. Thank you for the invitation to speak this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
No. Where I'm from, when I say good morning, you have to give me a rousing response. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes. No, I don't want to just run through the door because I feel welcome. My name is Dr. Tamara Chambers Richards. I know it's long, but I kept the Chambers because it's a part of my roots. And I am Richards because that's my fruit. I thought a lot about what I would say to you this morning, whether I should tell you about my childhood growing up in Jamaica as the fifth of 6 children in the home, a quiet girl who folks didn't know spoke because I was busy in my mind, thinking, dreaming of different tomorrows. I thought about whether I would tell you about my journey from Mandeville, Jamaica, when I left as an academic chair, established career woman, to come to Canada to pursue that PhD, that doctorate in epidemiology. Not because I had any great love for epidemiology, but because I decided to use that which I had in my hands towards the next step of my journey. I've been an educator, an educational administrator for a number of years. And I thought whether I would share with you how my early days or years in Canada were marked with what I didn't know it was at the time, functional depression, where you're used to wearing your strappy sandals, you're used to rushing out the door with 6 minutes because your job is just up the hill. If you ever try to leave with 6 minutes to get to your destination, you would find it difficult because you have to pause, you have to lace up those boots, you have to put on that coat in cold Saskatchewan. And what it meant to move from special to not so special. What it meant to have sold your cars and everything and to pack your entire lives into 12 pieces of luggage. What it meant to bring your children, a 1-year-old who regressed to breastfeeding, and a just turned 3-year-old, and what it meant after having landed in September 6th to be exact, and by November, you have no financial resources. Who would have thought that daycare would have been equivalent to $100,000 of your country's money per month for 2 children? Who would have thought that the school fee that you thought you had for a full year would be eaten up in daycare charges? And how do you study when that single brain that you have is the same brain that you're concentrating on finding the best place to live, finding the resources for your family, getting lost on the roadways because in your country you can just drive, like I said, 6 minutes to every destination that you need. But you now have to navigate the bus routes and get lost. I thought about whether I would share with you what it meant to become ill, physically ill, from the psychological effects of being different, and the burden that the heart carries for being different. Not because you choose to be different, but because you were born different. Because the skin that you're in carries your roots that are hard to trace. I did it. And glad I was able to trace the 15th, 16th, 17th generation of the Scottish line. I could not trace beyond the 3rd generation of the African line. I could not trace beyond the 3rd generation of the East Indian line. But yet I behold the blood of the Maroons, my people who refused to be enslaved and who mutinied off the shores when the ships that sailed the Atlantic landed and docked. It is because of this that I've decided to talk to you about roots and fruits. I'll share 3 quick points with you this morning. Know your roots, embrace both the nice and the necessary, and grow where you're planted. It is important for you to know your roots. Terry talks about your theme, which says building confidence through real dialogue. And I want to be real with you this morning, because your roots should never be forgotten. Your roots tell the story of who you are, of your dreams, of your vision, of where that will lead you in today's world. And as I talk about my roots, which are hard to trace, the roots that I hold dear to are my values. The values that were instilled with me very early on. My own compass that I have decided to meld. You see, I'm tired of entering spaces where I'm not looking in the mirror, but I have to see my face. How many of us know what we look like when we're not looking in a mirror? I leave that for you to think on. But I was talking about roots. And I tell you a quick story. When I was growing up, I said that I was a very quiet child. Some would say shy, some would say mute. And I realized that I didn't talk much. And I still don't talk much, especially when I don't feel safe. But there's something that I overheard my mother sharing with somebody when I was just a little child. You see, I had a very precocious sister, the one whom I followed. Very brilliant, very talkative, loquacious, I would say. And people would compare us. They would say to me, "You're quiety, you can talk." And I would say nothing. One day somebody came to the house and they were sharing the glories of my sister, just how brilliant she was, and trying to compare us. And I overheard my mother and she said, "Don't compare them." My sister, Dayon, she said, "Dayon is who she is, but Tammy is silently efficient." And that is my root. That's what I hold on to. I am who I am, and I choose to remain who I am, to embrace the qualities that I have been blessed. And as I talk about embracing those qualities, I move into my next point, which is for you to embrace both the nice and the necessary. Last evening, my children and I were filling out applications for their new school. And my daughter, I noticed that she was sad. So I asked her why she was sad. Her brother, it turns out, had said to her that she's only choosing silly things. So I asked her what she was choosing. She said she was choosing art, she was choosing drama, and the other things. So he said to her, "Shouldn't you choose something else, something more meaningful?" And I said, "Sometimes you have to do both what is nice and what is necessary." And she started to cry. And I explained to her what nice versus necessary means. Nice are the things that we're naturally good at, the things that propel us, the things that drive our passion and our dreams. The necessary, though, are the things that you might not want to do, but you must do, because they are the things that build your confidence, that ground you in those roots. So, as you think about your future, think about what is nice and what is necessary for you to fulfill your dreams. The third point that I wanted to share with you is about growing where you're planted. Grow where you're planted. The story is told of a little sapling, a young, succulent plant. He couldn't stand to be shaded by his mother, and he decided that he wanted to leave, to explore. He didn't want to be in the forest or the field anymore. He wanted to be a city tree. And so, this little sapling decided to leave home, the shades of home. And as he was walking, he met upon the tree by the riverside. And this tree was glorious. It had leaves and branches that were stretched to the sky. Its trunk was the biggest trunk that the sapling had ever seen. And so, curious, he turned to the tree and said, "How do you grow so tall and strong?" And the tree said, this tree was by the riverside. It said, because I've got roots growing down to the waters. And I've got leaves growing up to the sunshine. And the fruits that I bear are a sign of life in me. I am becoming just what I was meant to be, a strong young tree. And so little sapling put that in the back of his thought and continued to walk. And alas, he reached the city and he realized that the city wasn't as he thought it was. It wasn't as glamorous as he thought it was. He looked around, cars zooming by, all manner of things. And then he saw in the city a tree. This tree was not quite as big as the riverside tree, but it was big enough. It stood tall and proud, and it was laden with fruits. Curious, he thought, how do you grow so tall and strong? And the tree said, because I've got roots going down to the waters, I've got leaves growing up through the sunshine, and the fruits that I bear are a sign of life in me. I am becoming just what I am meant to be, a strong young tree. What was the difference between the riverside tree and the city tree? The lesson for you from the story is to grow where you're planted. When the waves of life will seek to buffet you, when it gets difficult, when you're frustrated with the language, not sure which words to use, remember your roots. Remember to embrace the nice and the necessary. Remember that from your roots come your shoots, from your shoots come your branches and your leaves, and from your leaves come your fruit. What fruit will you choose to bear today? How will you use the time that has been given you when life gets difficult? Remember your roots and how those roots should bear fruit. When life gets difficult for me, I think, I've got roots going down to the waters, I've got leaves growing up to the sunshine, and the fruit that I bear are a sign of life in me. You've got roots going down to the waters, you've got leaves growing up to the sunshine, and you're just what you're meant to be, a strong young tree. You're a strong young tree.